Well, first of all, a warm welcome to the first of our weekly Wednesday webinars for our Cuimhne project, which is organised by Irish in Britain. For those of you who might be new to our organisation, we're a charity, and whilst we have a physical base in London, we work across all parts of Britain and very much virtually at the moment. And this project has really come about because for a long time we've been working to support people living with dementia and their families and friends and carers, recognising that memory loss and dementia has quite a big impact on people from the Irish community and other BME communities as well. And certainly during this period of, during the pandemic, during the period of lockdown, with many additional issues that families are facing, we felt it would be a very useful set of webinars and support for people at this time. And we have launched this project with the support of the Race Equality Foundation. We welcome people from diverse communities to these webinars, and we hope that through the presentations, through the different speakers that we've organised over this month and next month, you will find support and also connections with us and with other organisations, and have an opportunity to listen to the experiences of others and have the opportunity to put your questions as well. The webinar is a short one, it's just for an hour, so I'm not going to speak very long for now, but I want to hand you over to our first speaker of this series, Dr. Mary Tilki. Many of you may have met Mary before. She has been involved with Irish in Britain for a great many years and is a very good supporter of our Cuimhne project. Mary is the patron of our Cuimhne project. Cuimhne is an Irish word meaning memory, and has various experiences, but has also trained as a nurse, and that is something that's really very much of value when talking about this project. So I'd like to hand over to Mary, and we will hear from Mary, who's going to be talking about what is dementia and how it affects the individual. And Mary will talk, and then towards the end we'll have an opportunity for people to ask questions. You can type your questions into the Q&A function in this webinar, in this Zoom webinar, and Aisling and I will pick up questions and put them to Mary, who will give some responses. If your question doesn't, if you don't have a chance to ask the question that you've been thinking of, please don't feel that's the end. We'll be having more webinars after this, and there'll be an opportunity after this webinar for us to put the question for you to Mary or to other people. So I'd like to hand over to Mary. Thanks very much.
Hi, good afternoon everybody, and welcome to the first in the series of our Cuimhne Carers project. I suppose prior to lockdown you couldn't have turned on the radio or the television or opened a paper without something about dementia featuring in it. It might have been how some type of diet can prevent dementia. It might be something about a cure being so much nearer. It could be about a community, a town, a village, what they're doing to actually make their communities more accessible for people with dementia and their carers. Now, sadly, during lockdown and currently, the papers and the news are actually featuring more about coronavirus than anything else. But dementia still remains an issue, and it's a very important issue for our community. The main reason for our concern about dementia is the increasing numbers of people who are actually beginning to get dementia now. And this is not good news, obviously, but in many ways it's actually a tribute to the fact that we're living longer. In reality, in the past, very few people lived long enough to get dementia. And I remember as a child, nobody knew about dementia, the word wasn't mentioned, but we all knew a few people, a very few people who we called were in their dotage. They were doting. Asher, ignore them, they're doting. But despite the fact that there are increasing numbers of people with dementia, and that will continue, they will continue to rise, dementia has been a very taboo subject in our society. We are beginning to talk a little bit more about it now, but it's still quite taboo. And part of the reason for that is the image we've got about people with dementia is that they're helpless and hopeless. We assume that they're always confused, they're getting lost. And a lot of people fear that they might be aggressive. We see them quite often as people in need of protection. They're often treated like children and seen as a burden to their families and society. And obviously there is an element of truth in that. People do become confused. They do need some care and protection. But this image, this negative image that society has of people with dementia tends to neglect the fact that the majority of people are actually living at home, in their own homes or with their families, and they're muddling along, they're getting by. We don't actually see the people with quite advanced dementia who are supported by families or in care homes or in, with community services, who are actually leading reasonably independent and fulfilled lives. And professionals, very sadly, until fairly recently, professionals often had a very negative view of people with dementia. They saw it as incurable, so there's nothing that can be done. Well, there still isn't a cure for dementia, and there isn't likely to be one on the horizon for quite a while yet, but there is a lot that can be done. And the whole basis of our Cuimhne project, and particularly this carers project, is actually to see if we can help people, to help those who are looking after family members with dementia. Now, it's a short session today. What I want to try and cover is, what is dementia? Who is at risk of dementia? Why are Irish people different? How would you know or suspect somebody had dementia? And how is the individual who has dementia affected by it? What does it feel like to have dementia? And I want to end up by challenging some of the misunderstandings about dementia and hopefully have a new way of looking at caring for the person with dementia in a more positive way. It's never going to be great news and it's always going to be a difficult task, but there may be ways in which we can help people with this demanding task. So what is dementia? Well, dementia is a collection of symptoms affecting the brain. We can write big tomes on what is dementia, but this is just something, I want to explain it in a very simple way, and I hope not to offend anybody by doing that. There are about 850,000 people with dementia in the UK at the moment. The majority of those are over 65. There are about 42,000 people below the age of 65 who have dementia, and that's known as young age dementia, young onset dementia, or increasingly it's called working age dementia. Now, there isn't one type of dementia. Dementia is an umbrella term which covers about 200 different types of dementia. But there are 4 or 5 very common types of dementia that we see more commonly. And probably the one you know most of all is Alzheimer's. And Alzheimer's disease accounts for about 60% of people who have dementia. The next most common type is called vascular dementia. And that's because it's related to the vascular system, the blood vessels. And people with heart disease, with high blood pressure, with stroke, with diabetes tend to be affected by that. And there is a group of people who get a combination of mainly Alzheimer's and mixed dementia, and that accounts for about 10% of people. And the other more common one, which affects about 10 to 15% of the population, is known as dementia with Lewy bodies, or Lewy body dementia, L-E-W-Y. And that tends to be more common in the older population. And you may hear of a type of dementia which affects the frontal lobe, the front of the brain, which is called frontotemporal dementia. And that tends to be more common in people who get dementia before the age of 65. So it is quite common, and the numbers are increasing, and it's expected to double by 2050, which isn't that far away really. So age is the most common risk factor. The older you are, the higher your risk is. So over the age of 65, there's a risk of 1 in 14 people, about 1 in 14 people getting dementia. And that increases until over the age of 85. It might be 1 in 6 people who get dementia. Now we can look at that very negatively, or we can look at it another way. 5 out of 6 people over 85 won't get dementia. So it's been, look at it a little bit more positively. The main risk factors are cardiovascular disease, heart disease, high blood pressure and hypertension, high blood pressure and stroke. And these are to a large degree preventable. And we can start preventing dementia by dealing with these now. And I think that's particularly important for the Irish community, who often don't like taking their blood pressure tablets or their heart tablets. And we have got, the Irish community have got very high levels of heart disease, stroke, hypertension. Other Black and minority ethnic communities have high levels of those as well. And the Asian community and Caribbean have high levels of diabetes, which also contribute. As far as we know, the Irish community don't have those at the moment, but that may be because there's an absence of research in the area. And the other group that we would not have been thinking about years ago, people with Down syndrome, who didn't live long enough to get dementia in the past, and now very frequently they do get dementia, sometimes in the late 40s and early 50s. The other group that we should be concerned about as an Irish community is the travelling community, Irish travellers. They don't live for very long. They've got a very low life expectancy, but we're seeing very high levels of young age dementia in particular in those groups. So the risk is great. If there's a high risk, we estimate that there are about 10,000 Irish people with dementia in the UK at the moment. So that means that there are, families are actually looking after mostly families are looking after these people with dementia. Now, Irish people, like people in other communities, don't consider themselves carers. They see themselves as wives or daughters or sons or family members doing what family members do. But they are family carers, or they're often known as informal carers. And there's evidence from various research that has been undertaken that Irish families, and particularly Irish traveller families, are required to give very high levels of care. Some people caring for somebody for between 50 and 100 hours a week. Those of you who are carers will actually appreciate that and recognise it very carefully. So how do you know somebody might have dementia? Well, as I said, there are many different types of dementia, but even if you had 2 people, even if you had 10 people with the same type of dementia, they would be different depending on the part of the brain that was affected and depending on the situation the person lives in. I suppose the most common symptom and sign that we think about is memory loss. And it usually starts with recent memory loss. And many of you will have come across people who don't remember what day of the week it is today, but yet they can recall things that happened several decades ago. So recent memory loss is a very common feature. But there are other aspects to dementia as well. There are other things that would lead you to suspect that somebody might be developing dementia. People often say to me, she keeps asking me questions. I've told her that time and time again. So repetition is a common feature. The person with dementia may lack concentration. They may start to do something and forget what they're doing, or they may not be able to carry that skill out, such as making a cup of tea or something like that. People get lost. We all get lost sometimes, but getting lost in familiar surroundings is a worrying feature, and it's very frightening for the person concerned. People have problems with their speech. They may have problems with their speech. They can't think of the word. They stop mid-sentence. They can't carry on a conversation. They can't carry on the thread of a conversation. Now, I think you're probably all thinking that's happening to me now. Well, if you're thinking that it's happening to you, you probably haven't got dementia yet. But speech is a major issue. There's one thing I need to say about Irish people as well. People who are native Irish speakers, whose mother tongue is Irish. They've spoken in English, they've communicated effectively in English for several decades, but when they get dementia, they may lose that ability to speak in English and only speak in Irish. And that's very difficult because family members often can't speak in that language, and they may not be carers around who are actually able to do that. You might also find changes in personality or behaviour. Somebody who used to be very outgoing becomes very withdrawn, or vice versa. Somebody who was very calm and collected might become very difficult. They might become angry, become angry very quickly. And there might also be an element of disinhibition. Somebody who never would have said anything to hurt anybody else might say things like, "Oh goodness me, what a terrible dress you're wearing," or, you know, look at that person there, what a stupid hat they've got on. I've also come across people who never said a rude word in their life. They start swearing like troopers. So it could be any or all of these. It's very individual. It depends very much on the part of the brain, the type of dementia, and also the person. But if you don't have contact with that person and you only see them on an irregular basis, you may not notice that. But also, even if you do see somebody, they compensate. People compensate. They compensate for their forgetfulness by writing lists, by making notes, by using a diary. But also, people avoid situations. They might avoid going out if they're afraid of getting lost, or if they're afraid of bumping into people that they won't recognise. And also people cover up things. They cover up the saucepan they've burnt, the toast they've burnt, and things like that. So you may not notice it. It may have been going on for a period of time. And then you notice it at Christmas or a birthday or some family event or something like that. So these are some of the signs that somebody might have dementia. And I'm sorry if you think you've got it now, because, you know, we all suffer from some of these from time to time. People often ask me, is the person with dementia aware of what's happening to them? And as far as we know, particularly in the early stages, people are very aware. They're aware they're forgetting things. They're aware they're not recognizing faces. They're aware that they're not able to recognize the names of family members that they should. They're conscious that they keep losing things. They lose their keys. They may go to the shop and bring home, say, milk, and they may have 6 bottles of milk in the fridge. So people are often very aware of that. And it's very sad that we joke about dementia. We say we've got dementia. And that can be very painful for somebody who is having problems with their memory. So people are far more aware than we usually recognise. But what they're trying to do is trying to be as normal as possible. And that's, that's a compensatory mechanism. And that in itself causes anxiety. So I want to focus a little bit on memory because it's a very important aspect of our lives. It's essential for us to learn. We learn how to talk, we learn how to read, we learn how to walk and carry out our daily activities. We're not conscious of it, but our memory is an important aspect of that. Our memory is a function of the brain where we process information, where we store it and then retrieve it, hopefully, when we need to retrieve it. Different parts of the brain deal with memory, mood, speech, and behaviour. But memory is mainly processed by 2 parts of the brain, one which is the hippocampus and the other is the amygdala. We don't need to remember those technical terms, but you know, they do have different features. I realise that I'm racing, but I'm very anxious to get as much information across as possible. The Alzheimer's Society use what they call a bookcase analogy to describe what happens to the person's memory when they have dementia. They call it the bookcase model of memory storage and retrieval. And you can look this up on our website. We've got it on our website. There's a very short video clip which actually demonstrates it, probably much more clearer than I can do. But I want you to imagine me as an 80-year-old standing next to a big bookcase, a tall bookcase, about the same height as I am. And all the shelves are full of books. These books represent all the facts I've learned, all the names, the faces, the dates, the addresses, all the things that I've stored in there over my 80 years. And it's the hippocampus part of the brain that actually processes them, stores them, and helps retrieve them. Now, there are several shelves on this bookcase, and on the top shelf are my most recent memories. What I had for breakfast, who came to see me today, the doctor's appointment I had yesterday, some other features of my recent things that have happened in my life. On the next shelf down, the memories are stored, maybe from a year ago, from my birthday, last Christmas, the wedding I went to, something that we did as a family. On the lower shelf down, there's probably, might have stored the memories of my working life, bringing up my children, things that happened maybe when I was in my 40s, 30s or 40s, something like that. On a lower shelf, my memories of leaving home, emigrating, finding accommodation in this country, going to all the dances, getting married, having a new life. They'll all be stored on a shelf somewhere lower down. The lowest shelves will have the memories from my childhood there. The things I learnt at school, the poetry, the wallopings I got from the teachers, all those kind of things. And when dementia strikes, it rocks this bookshelf, this bookcase, and the books on top fall off. So my most recent memories, I lose the most recent memories. And because the books have fallen off the shelf, it can be very difficult to store any more memories there. So I rely on the memories from the next shelf down, and so on and so forth. As memory deteriorates, we rely more on earlier and earlier memories. And this is why somebody with dementia may not remember what day of the week it is or what they had for lunch today, but they can actually sing the songs that they learnt at school or recite the poems or their times tables, something like that. And sometimes what happens, because they can't rely on their recent memories, they muddle up some of the memories maybe from last year. They'll tell you that somebody came to see them and that person hadn't come to see them for maybe a couple of years. So this is the factual part of memory. But just to complicate matters, well, not to complicate matters, it's quite nice really. There is another bookcase on the other side, but this is a very strong, sturdy one. This is the bookcase that's stored, the books are stored in the same way, the memories are stored in the same way, most recent first. But this bookcase actually stores our emotional memories. It's more about feelings, it's about affection, it's about things like joy and love, but it's also about sadness and anger, and things like that as well. Now this bookcase is much sturdier, so it stands up to the knocking that dementia gives it. So although the person may not be able to express their feelings, they may not recognize you when they come to visit, but they will have feelings of joy. They will retain feelings of joy, affection, happiness, and warmth. So take, for example, you go and visit your mother. You maybe go out and have a cup of tea together. You do something together. You have a lovely time. She may not recognize you. She may call you by somebody else's name. And you may think, oh, there's no point in going to see my mother. She doesn't recognize me any longer. but she will be happier, calmer and content as a result of that. She may call you by her sister's name because she's got her bookshelves mixed up, but she loved her sister. So instead of you being offended that she, or upset that she has forgotten your name, think about it. She actually thinks you're somebody that she was very fond of. But equally, a sound, a sensation, the appearance of somebody who might look similar can trigger happy memories for somebody, but they can also trigger unhappy memories and make the person sad or angry or withdrawn. It might be the tone of voice that somebody uses. It might be somebody in a uniform. It might be the way somebody dresses or the way somebody looks that reminds them of somebody else, which can trigger an unhappy memory. This is quite important for people, for Irish people who may have experienced abuse in an orphanage, in an industrial school, even in their own home, and something triggers that emotion and they become very sad, they may become angry, they may become aggressive. So it's very important we know that. It may be something like feeling cold, feeling hungry, being left in the dark may trigger a memory of something that nasty that happened to them in their childhood. So this is where we differ in many ways from people who are very similar to us. So we have a higher risk because of being Irish. We have a higher risk of dementia because of our age and because of the various disorders and the social isolation we experience. But also, it's important for us to understand this bookcase analogy, because turning on the right music, singing a song, saying a poem can actually have the opposite effect and actually make somebody very calm, and it can help them quite a lot. So we do need to understand that bookcase analogy. So moving on, I think the next thing for me to do is to go on and talk a little bit about some of the misunderstandings we have about people with dementia. I can't emphasize enough that every person is different. And that is very much a feature of the type of dementia they have, the stage of dementia, but it relies more than anything else on the environment that they're in. You can have two people with very similar symptoms, one who is socially isolated and one who manages to get out and about. And the one who manages to get out and about for the most part may be much easier, maybe a much more contented person and leading a better quality of life. I think the other thing that I want to emphasize is really important is the person with dementia remains the person they always were. I often hear people saying, he's a shadow of his former self, or he's only a shell. And that's very sad. And I can understand why people say that. They may not be able to communicate. The family may not understand their behavior or feel able to communicate with them. But the person with dementia is very much the person they always were. So it's really important that we understand as much as possible about that person, about their life story, maybe some of the, the bookshelves that we've just been talking about, because that can make a big difference to how we treat the person and how they feel and how they experience dementia. People with dementia understand a lot more than we think they do. They may not be able to express it, and we're in danger of assuming that because somebody can't express what they're feeling or what they want, that they don't understand. Now, I'm not suggesting it's easy. It can be very difficult for a family carer to understand, but we've got to be very careful. If we assume somebody doesn't understand, there is a tendency that we talk over them, or we talk very loudly to them, or we make decisions for them. We don't involve them in decisions. And that is very painful and very hurtful for the person with dementia. And I'm not claiming it's easy, but I think we have to be very conscious of that. It's important to be aware as well that people know they have problems and that they're struggling to be as normal and to continue as normal life as possible. And I think it's important in that case not to remind people. They don't need reminding that they've got problems with memory or they've got problems with speech. And I know it's very draining to have to keep answering the same question, to keep telling the person to do something that's in their best interest and they don't do it. But we should avoid, if possible, ways of pointing out that people have problems. Try not to say, I told you that 5 minutes ago. Try not to speak over the person, and if you can involve them in a decision, give them a limited choice. Would you like to do this or this? And then see which one they would prefer. It's important to remember as well that memory fluctuates. It's good sometimes and it's bad other times, but your own memory is probably a bit like that. Your memory is probably worse when you're tired, when you're anxious about something, when you're in a strange place or in a strange situation. Memory is often worse. So it's worth kind of bearing in mind that somebody might forget something today, but be fine and remember it in the morning. Similarly, speech and the ability to carry out tasks, maybe to do things for themselves, can be affected by tiredness, can be affected by anxiety. And the other thing that is important is, I suppose it happens to us all really. Very hard to think if you're in a very noisy environment or there's a lot going around the person. I think it's important that people with dementia are stimulated and there's enough going on around them. But perhaps, often there may be too much noise and too much going on around them and they can't cope with that. There is a natural tendency to overprotect the person who has dementia, to stop them going out, to stop them cooking, maybe to take most of their money away to avoid them losing it or spending it frivolously. And that's done in the best interest of the person in the vast majority of cases. But that de-skills the person. They can lose their confidence. They can lose the ability to look after themselves very quickly. So I don't know what the answer is. It's a difficult balance because you don't want the person to come to any harm, but by the same token, you don't want to risk losing their confidence and making the most of the skills that they still retain. And throughout the course of the webinars, we'll actually talk, well, some experts will actually talk more about that. We've got several stories on our website that we've borrowed from Alzheimer's Society in Ireland. Stories from Irish people about Irish people with dementia, about the importance of retaining normality, about getting out and about and letting people know you have a problem rather than hiding it. And I think one of the points I do want to make is the tendency might be to stop the individual going out. But if you're a carer, you may also feel it's very difficult to manage getting up and going to a luncheon club, going out for a walk, maybe going to church, doing things like that. It is very difficult. But social isolation is a major contributor to dementia. And if at all possible, people should be able to maintain that social interaction as much as possible. We've found that Irish carers can be very embarrassed about their loved one if the person doesn't recognise people, if they say things that maybe they wouldn't have said normally, if their behaviour is out of character for them. The family feel embarrassed about it. But if you actually talk to people and tell them about the problem and make sure they know that there is a problem there, you can actually go a long way towards maintaining a normal, well, not a normal, but as near a normal social life as possible. Equally, if you know that somebody is caring for a person with dementia, you may be embarrassed yourself. You may not know what to say to the person with dementia. You may not know what to say to the carer. You may feel that the person is very strange and you don't want to get involved. And what happens then is the family, the person with the dementia and the carer become very isolated. So I think we need to think a little bit more about, as a community, about what we can do to actually communicate and keep carers and people with dementia as involved as possible in the local community. Caring is very hard work. So we need to be there to support the people who are actually caring for their loved ones. They do it willingly, but it is a very demanding task. And the carers need as much support as possible. So we hope this project will go some way to helping family carers continue and carry on as long as possible, looking after the person with dementia. So over the next 7 weeks, we have a number of experts in to talk to you in these webinars about various aspects of being a carer. And next week, somebody will be talking to you about communication, not just about how to speak and how to act with a person who has dementia, but how the behaviour of the person is a form of communication. The section following that will be on practical tips to help you as a carer. Practical stuff like helping the person with dressing, eating, going to the toilet, sleeping, all those very practical matters that you've had no training for and you may have been landed with it very suddenly. So I think the practical stuff will be very important. We will have somebody in the week after that talking about how to deal with difficult behaviour. As I've mentioned, difficult behaviour is a method of communication for people with dementia. So somebody will be talking about how to prevent it as much as possible, but then how to deal with it if it occurs. We've also got a session on how to care for yourself, because it's very easy to focus on the person with dementia, caring for the person with dementia, but not caring about the person who's caring for that person with dementia. And the majority of carers are actually older people. They often have health problems themselves. And whilst we want to do the best we can for our loved ones, it is a very demanding role. So it's important that family carers actually look after themselves. And then we've got a session on the legal and financial matters, which are important. We don't like talking about them. We're very embarrassed about legal matters and financial matters in the Irish community. But they do need to be talked about, and the earlier you begin those conversations, the better. And then there is another session about thinking ahead to a time when you may not be able to carry on the role of caring. Thinking about some of those things, what's available, the decisions that you have to make. And we have got somebody coming, an expert coming to talk to us about end-of-life care. Again, not a nice thing to think about, but the sooner we think about it, the better. We don't have all the answers. Many of the experts who are coming to talk to these series of seminars will have a lot of the answers. They'll be able to answer a lot of the questions that you want to ask. And we'll be setting up, if we haven't done it already, so I have to take advice from the rest of the team here, there will be an online forum for people who are caring, where you can talk to other carers, learn from them what worked for them, maybe have a moan and say the things that you don't feel you can say to other members of the family or to professionals, and get help from people who understand the situation you're in. So it's a fairly extensive program, but it's only a start, and we hope that once we have finished those this series of webinars, you will find it useful to use the resources that we have online, and we will continue to put online, and we will continue to respond to your requests for things like that. So I think I've run out of things to say, which is quite unusual for me, but thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mary. We have just a couple of questions actually that I will just direct to you. Can you hear me, Mary?
Yes,
You
I can. Yeah.
Okay, good. So we just have a question here. Just perhaps a little bit about difficult conversations. They're worried about a relative that may have dementia, but isn't sure how they can persuade or encourage them to go to a doctor to get a diagnosis. Would you have any advice for that?
Yes, it is a difficult one. It's very difficult to persuade somebody who doesn't want to go. But I think the important thing about it is actually maybe they can be persuaded to go, because some of the signs of dementia, some of the symptoms of dementia may not be dementia. There may be something that is actually treatable. It may be an infection. It may be something to do with the drugs they're taking. There can be a whole host of reasons why somebody is confused. It can be different to dementia, but it is well worth ruling those out as well. The other thing that might persuade somebody is that if it is dementia, there may be some treatment that will help in the early stages, particularly of Alzheimer's disease. There may be some drugs that can actually delay the progress of the disease. So it might be worth, if it is dementia, actually go, the earlier you can get that, the better. But I think the other reason, and it is a more difficult reason to get across to somebody who doesn't want to go, is that if it is dementia, you want to know about it as soon as possible so you can plan for the future. And some of that might be around making plans about who's going to care for you, how you want to be cared for at a later stage. But also it may be about accessing benefits to which you are entitled. There are benefits, there aren't very many and you're not going to get rich on it, but there may be benefits to which you as a carer or the person with dementia is entitled. There are discounts on council tax. But in order to get some of these benefits, you have to be getting other benefits. So there may be ways in which you could persuade the person to go to the GP, have the quick assessment that the GPs do, and go on, be forwarded on to memory clinic, a memory service, so that the family members can learn how to carry on caring, how to do care in the best way. I hope that answers some of the queries that were raised. Back to you, Aisling.
Yes, thank you, Mary. Sorry about that delay there. Yeah, we just have we have a couple more questions, if that's okay. I'll just have a look now in our questions and answers. So I'm not sure if you've already addressed this, Mary, and sorry if I've missed it. But in terms of sort of Alzheimer's and dementia and the differences, would you be able to sort of just go over that briefly?
Yeah. Well, dementia is the kind of umbrella term for a whole range of disorders affecting the brain. And as I said, there are about 200 of them, but there are 4 or 5 very common ones. And Alzheimer's is the most common type of dementia. About 60% of people who have dementia are likely to get Alzheimer's. So does that answer the question?
Yes, I think it does. Thank you, Mary. I think we've probably got time for a couple more, do we?
Yes, if you have time, I have time.
I have time. I think we said we'd go until 3, so I think we definitely have some time there. I might just hand over to Zibby, just see if Zibby has any questions there that she wants to ask, if that's all right. So just bear with me for one moment.
Yeah.
Hello, have I appeared again?
Hi, Zibby.
Hi, Zibby.
So, Mary, I wonder if you could talk a bit more about the situation that many carers are in now, where it can be much more difficult to go out. People may be living at home with somebody that they're caring for in their family, or somebody else in their home, and ideas for how to best support carers to look after themselves in this time, and how we as a community can take action.
That's a difficult one, but it's not in. I think people who are caring for somebody and they're in some degree of distress because the person is very agitated, maybe not sleeping, maybe the person's behaviour has become more difficult because they're locked down, they're not able to go out so much. Those carers might find it useful to get in touch with either Dementia UK and speak to the Admiral nurses there, or to the Alzheimer's Society. Both of these services have got helplines 7 days a week, though not 24 hours a day, but they would be very useful if somebody is, you know, at the end of their tether, so they might well be. But I think it may be useful for people who are caring for somebody with dementia to try things like maybe music, if they know what music the person likes, maybe making a playlist with somebody. And the sooner we do things like that, listening to their favourite music, maybe going back to the poems or the songs that they learnt in childhood. And if somebody has got reasonably advanced dementia, it won't matter if it's the same song every day for a week. If the song has a calming effect on the person, or the poem has a calming effect on the person, that's what matters really. Not, you might be bored to tears with it as a carer. I think the other thing is if somebody has a garden, or they can take a short walk, if they're able to do that, it can actually help. And maybe carrying out some projects, if the person with dementia is able to help with some things in the house, maybe setting the table, peeling the potatoes, doing things that might be useful. The men can maybe help in the garden. So keeping the person as occupied as possible. But I would stress the importance of the carer actually getting help and support and talking to somebody about it, which might be Dementia UK or the Alzheimer's Society, or talking to our Cuimhne carers group, the online carers group.
Thank you, Mary. We've had a question also about from somebody who says they understand the side effects of medication, which is designed to calm and sleep. And the question is about how you balance those risks against sleeplessness, anxiety, distress, and fear somebody might have of dying for the person living with dementia.
Yes, that's a kind of a medical question, which is a little outside my my pay grade, and I think again the best people to answer that would be Admiral nurses. I think nobody wants to use medication unnecessarily, but it is important that the person with dementia actually gets some sleep, but more importantly that the carer actually gets some sleep. So it may be continuing with the medication, providing it's not making the person too sleepy during the day or having deleterious side effects. It may be about thinking about what's causing the sleeplessness. You've mentioned that the person might be frightened, might fear dying. So it may be about talking to the person. Don't assume they don't understand. Talk to them and hopefully they'll listen. But it might be things like a calm routine before the person goes to bed. It might be making sure that they're not hungry or they're not thirsty before they go to bed. It's about getting a balance between not, you know, the bedroom being dark but not too dark, having low lighting in the bedroom, so that the person isn't scared of the dark if they wake up. It might be just checking whether the person is in any pain and dealing with that. Telling the person that you're going to be there with them if they're frightened. And if the person wants to lie down with their shoes on, and you know, it's easier for you to do that. It's not very, you may not like the idea of that, but actually don't fight, don't argue with the person. Keep them as calm as possible. It's more difficult for you than it is for them. And it might be thinking about the person's daytime routine as well, making sure that they're adequately stimulated during the day, but not overstimulated. So a period of resting and calm before whatever time bedtime is. But you know, there's some thoughts. They're not going to work for everybody, but they might help a little bit for somebody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And I think we have just a little bit more time there, so I might just ask you something that I think you might have just touched upon briefly there. But we have a question about sort of supporting people with dementia and whether it's a good idea or not to contradict somebody if they're saying something that isn't true, or is it perhaps kind of easier and more sensitive to go along with their version of reality? And I think you might have just touched on that, but that's a question that has come up.
Yeah, I think the easiest thing to do is to go along with somebody. It is their reality. If they want to go and collect the kids from school at 3 o'clock, it's very difficult for you to convince them that they don't have to go and collect their children from school at 3 o'clock. So it's much easier to try and distract somebody or to go along with that reality, rather than making them angry and making them anxious by disagreeing with them. Again, you know, it's very important to understand where they're coming from. If somebody wants to go and pick their kids up at 3 o'clock, you know yourself how difficult it would be for you if you couldn't go and pick your children up at the right time. So it's doing something to distract them, finding out a little bit more about their children. What are their children's names? And if necessary, telling white lies. They call it therapeutic lying. Obviously, if it's going to create any harm to the person or anybody else, you've actually got to tell the truth and be very truthful about it and confront it. But mostly it's going to be a lot easier for the person with dementia and for you, the carer, if people, if you just go along, distract or go along with their reality. I'm sure Joe, who's talking about communication next week, and certainly the Admiral nurses who are along in one of the other weeks, they'll deal with that far more efficiently than I will.
That's perfect. Thank you very much, Mary. So we have a few moments left, so just want to sort of put a call out and see if there are any other questions. If anybody wants to pop anything into the question and answer box just now, we'll just wait a few moments. But Mary, do you have any sort of concluding thoughts on today's session?
I hope it's useful. I will look back at it and think I should have said this and I should have said that, but we've got 7 or 8 more weeks to go, so we'll be able to pick up some of those points later on. But thank you all for listening.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you everybody for attending. Please do visit our website for more details on our project, and hopefully we will see everybody at our upcoming webinars, of which there are 6 left. Isn't that right, Mary? 6?
7, I think, left. Yeah.
7, including this. Okay. All right. Okay. Perfect. All right then.
Thank you, everybody.
We'll wrap up now.
So we would also really value your feedback and thoughts, suggestions for other sessions we could run. I think as you log out of this, a questionnaire will pop up, which will be a chance for you to give us your feedback and tell us any comments you have or anything else you'd like to see in future sessions. As Aisling and Mary have said, the sessions are every Wednesday And the next one coming up will be Jo from Irish Services in Greenwich, Bexley and Lewisham. He is very experienced in this topic as well, and she'll be coming to join us very soon.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.